You're watching Oilers Nation every day with Tyler Yaremchuk. Your one-stop shop for all things Oilers.
Happy game day, everybody. Tyler Yaremchuk and David Quadrelli back with you for another Oilers Nation Everyday Canucks Conversation crossover episode. Quads, the other one was such a big hit, they made us work on the weekend and do it again.
I'm excited to do it, Tyler. Look, and I'm not going to disparage anyone, but I've done some other crossovers, and I must say, you're one of my favorites to do the crossover episodes with. It's been a lot of fun.
It's because we both like to text about Lego now.
That's right. Yes. Well, you've got that knockoff. No, I'm not. We're not going to get into it. We're not going to get into the Lego. We're not going to get into it.
This is honestly a really interesting spot for this crossover episode to be happening, because if you remember, we did one of these back earlier in the season, and it was in November. It was on, that game was also a Saturday the 9th. It was also in Vancouver, but it came at a point where the Oilers had lost back-to-back games. They were still kind of in this early season spiral, and since then, the Oilers have just been on an upward trajectory, back to kind of establishing themselves as a legit Stanley Cup contender. I'd call them the Stanley Cup favorite right now. But what about the Canucks? Catch up, Oilers fans. Since November 9th, boy, I'm realizing what a loaded question this is. Since November 9th, how have things been going in Canucks land?
How much time do you have? How much time do we have for this? Look, listeners that are getting this on their Canucks Convo feed are going to know exactly what's happened in that time. But okay, I'm going to try to summarize this. Give me 2 minutes. I'm going to time myself 2 minutes, okay, to try to tell you everything that's happened since the last time we talked. This Pettersson-Miller rift got out into the public. We've heard about it for years. Tyler, I think you and I actually talked about it off the record once when I was in Edmonton. But anyways, this got out in the public. Hughes owned up to it, or not owned up to it, but talked about it publicly. Rick Tocchet talked about it publicly. The players have kind of deflected it a bit, but there is the recognition that it's there. The whole league obviously knows about it. It's been a talking point. Teams are calling on Pettersson and Miller. We know that they are looking around at the market for both players and trying to figure out what they could get for both players. There is a lot of rumors, reports, whatever you want to call them, that internally, the Canucks were trying to figure out which player they wanted to keep, and that maybe there was some suggestion that some people in the organization wanted to keep Miller, some people wanted to keep Pettersson. I don't know if you watched the game against the LA Kings, but I think everybody is now on board with keeping Elias Pettersson, is what it is. Again, that's a big generalization, but JT Miller gets called out pretty heavily by the head coach after that game. The quote was, "It seems like every time he's on the ice, something bad happens." I said it, that he looks Pierre-Luc Dubois levels of checked out right now. And look, I've heard a lot about an injury. The player says he's not hurt. He says, "I'm good." The coach says there's no injury. I've heard a lot about an injury, so I struggle to come out here and just absolutely rip JT a new one and say, "Oh, he's not even trying." But really, whatever the injury is, we've all heard upper body. Don't know how much it's affecting his legs. And right now it's legs, it's decisions. So I struggle to kind of put my thumb right on this one and say, yep, that's the issue right there. Not loving what we're seeing from JT right now in Vancouver. I think that's the easiest way to say it. There's a lot of talk about how a change is necessary, and ultimately, Tyler, it's go time. If you're going to make the playoffs, you probably will be able to in the second wildcard spot, even if you struggle, just because the teams around them aren't a huge threat. But those weren't the expectations. Those weren't the expectations heading in this year. It was to take a step beyond what you did last season, and the team doesn't look like they're going to be able to do that. And look, I think a lot of this goes on management for constructing the blue line that they did, but at the end of the day as well, when your team shows that they're as fragile as this core group has and continues to show, look, they're giving up. They're giving up on their coach in terms of defending, and they were just so sharp at defending the rush last year. And this year, they're just making bad decisions. And it's starting, as Tocchet said last night, it's starting with your good players, and it can't happen that way.
Is Tocchet in the last year of his deal?
Yeah. So he has an option, and the team has an option. So he can choose to come back. The team can choose to have him back, but yeah, he's a lame duck coach basically.
Wow. That is really interesting. So then I guess before we get into some of the Oilers side of things here, I just remember being in that building last year for the playoffs and the JT Miller chants, and it felt he felt like the fan favorite from an outside perspective. Has he fallen out of favor a bit now with kind of what's happening here? Or if you polled Canucks fans and said Miller or Pettersson, is it still super divisive?
Absolutely, it's divisive. Absolutely, it is. I've been pretty open with the fact that you take the younger player. Again, I know 11.6 is a big price tag, but you take the younger player in this instance. Pettersson is really sharp defensively at 5-on-5. Miller's numbers suggest that for him to actually be good defensively, he needs to be playing with the other 4 best players on the team that he could possibly have. So again, I'm not going to sit here and do a JT versus Pettersson thing. Pettersson sucked this year. What is it, like 3 points in his last, I don't even know what it is at this point. I think it's 11, 12 games. I'm tired of talking about it. To be honest, from the start, I was telling people all the time on Canucks Convo that I was on team get over it. You're paid millions of dollars. I'm not on team JT. I'm not on team PD. But at this point, if it's actually getting down to it, and I think ultimately the team is trending in this direction of trading JT at this point, I think that's probably the decision I would make as well. It's too bad that it's not working out, but I think last night really showed you that it isn't working out. It's not going to work out. So they have to figure out what they're going to do. And I think that's going to be trading JT Miller, but we'll see. I will tell you, I was sitting in the press box last night. I look over, Jim Rutherford was standing for the entire second and third periods. And when Jim is standing for that long and he was watching that team like a hawk last night, something tells me something's going to change.
And that front office usually doesn't hesitate to pull the trigger on something. From an Oilers perspective, their front office did pull the trigger on something today, signing John Klingberg to a 1-year deal for the rest of the season. He hasn't played in basically 14 months. He signed with the Leafs last year, got off to a god-awful start, and then was put on IR, got hip resurfacing surgery. He says he's 100%. He says he's been skating for a couple of months now by himself, and then with a junior team. Basically, the cap is very complicated on this. It's $1 million prorated with a $350,000 signing bonus for Klingberg. So depending on if the Oilers are in LTIR space or if they're accruing cap space and under the salary cap, it basically counts anywhere from like $800K to 1.7. He's not going to play tonight against the Vancouver Canucks, but he could be in the lineup when the two sides face off on Thursday, which I totally forgot. It's 2 in a week for the Oilers and Canucks here. But the Klingberg signing's pretty interesting because, I mean, even you from an outsider perspective know the Oilers need help on the right side of their blue line. No CC, no Desharnais, and they want to upgrade there. They wanted their Ekholm-style right shot defenseman to eventually come in. I don't think Klingberg is that. I don't even know if I really love the upside here. Like, it's a guy that hasn't played in 14 months. Expecting him to come handle top 4 minutes for the Edmonton Oilers, I think is a pretty significant gamble to be making, not even cap-wise or anything, but just in the sense of, my concern is if he comes in and plays good for a month, they're going to lull themselves into a sense of security where, like, we don't need to add anyone else. We're good. And then this thing is going to flame out come playoff time. But what do you make of the Klingberg ad from an Oilers perspective, from an outsider's perspective, I guess?
Am I going to get in trouble with Oilers fans if I say Josh Brown sucks?
No, God, they hate him.
Well, okay, so you're looking for a Josh Brown upgrade, right? Isn't that all Klingberg has to be a success for the Oilers?
Yeah, and hey, if he ends up just being the 7th defenseman, then sure. I mean, he takes Troy Stetcher's spot in the lineup for now. So, like, is he even a Troy Stetcher upgrade? Like, I'm not even sold he's that. I don't think he's as competitive in his own end as Stetcher is. And again, my worry would be the cap it could be significant once they get into LTIR space. Like, taking up $1.7 million of Evander Kane's money, which is only $5.125 they'll be able to spend this year, is pretty big. To do that on a guy who's a gamble, I don't know. On one hand, it's a free bet. On the other hand, it's like, oh boy, do the Oilers think this is a solution?
Okay, so this isn't as inconsequential as I thought it was. Like, it could be consequential. Okay, so I didn't really look at it through that lens, so I get what you're saying to some extent. And I will say, like, when it was brought up that the Canucks were kicking tires, even with the horrible right side blue line that we have out here, Harmon and I, when we would talk about this, the brief Klingberg conversation we had was, he wasn't great before he went down, and now he's had hip surgery. I would not be willing to take a risk on him. We'll see. Again, I don't even know. Like, I think I agree with you, Tyler. Like, I don't know what the upside is here. We'll see. I guess we'll wait and see. I'm not going to sit here and say a guy I haven't watched play for 14 months is a horrible signing for the Oilers at that cap hit, but I think it's a we'll see sort of thing. What's the vibe like in Oilers land right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few people who don't love the cap hit. I think a lot of people do kind of recognize it's a free bullet here. And I think the people who are concerned like me are just more of like, is the front office going to be disciplined enough if this isn't going well in 3 weeks? Or even if it is going well, are they still going to stay on the hunt to aggressively go out and try to get another defenseman in the mix here? Because I don't think, even if John Klingberg bounces back to some extent here and actually starts to look like an NHLer, which he wasn't when he was with the Leafs, even if he bounces back to some kind of a level, is he good enough to be confident in him playing top 4 minutes in the playoffs? I just don't really see that at all. To flip things more to the on-ice product for these two teams, I'm kind of looking through the Canucks season so far. And early on in the year, this would have been even before our last crossover, it was, a 4-game winning streak, a 3-game winning streak. Since then, they've just kind of been plagued by inconsistencies. It's win 1, lose 2, win 1, lose 2 kind of thing, win 2, lose 3. What's kind of been the number one thing plaguing them? Like when you look at a Canucks game that is executed and played well and they win, and compare it to a game maybe like one of the last two where they've kind of just gotten shellacked, what are the biggest differences on the ice?
Commitment to defending. It's the commitment to playing defense, which is what this team did so well last year. They did it at such a level that it made them find success in the playoffs with Artur Shilov's in net, who's unplayable this season. And I mean, look, Oilers fans know all about that, and the commitment to defending that this team had. It's power play success, it's star power. There's no star power on this team. Last year, down the stretch, Elias Pettersson struggled. Those struggles have come into this year. And for JT Miller, it's been an awful season for JT Miller. It's been just, and especially right now, like, again, getting called out by the coach last night against the LA Kings, Thursday night against the LA Kings, when he came out and said it seems like every time he's on the ice, bad things are happening. That is a big indictment on a player's performance. Talking about decision-making, all that. Like, it's not going well for the Canucks right now. You had that game against the Toronto Maple Leafs where everybody was so committed to defending, and ultimately, like, Elias Pettersson played shutdown minutes and he shut down that Austin Matthews line. Like that was a big feat. And look, people were yelling Selke. His teammates were yelling Selke at him from the bench, and he played great in that game. But it's that commitment to defending from the team that just hasn't been there. And again, the star power. You don't have your star players going, and they're not going anywhere right now. And ultimately, like, goaltending as well. We had the pleasure of watching Thatcher Demko last year play for this team and be a Vezina finalist. He's not been a Vezina finalist. He's been one of the worst goaltenders in the league, quite frankly, since he's come back. And that, I think that's come as a bit of a shock to a lot of people. I actually asked Rick talking about it last night, just about Demko and what his read is on where his game's at right now. And Tocchet did say, he's like, we got to get him on a run. Like, we need to get him into a bunch of games. So that's the really curious thing about this game against the Oilers. Is it going to be a Thatcher Demko start? It's been a Lankin and Demko split when the two guys are healthy. Do they go back to Thatcher Demko to let him try to get into some sort of rhythm? Because that was, I think, what I took away from Tocchet's answer on Thursday night.
Man, if your goalie's not playing 100% right now, though, and you want to throw him to the Wolves against this Oilers offense, which is feasting on a lot of teams right now. I mean, Mackenzie Blackwood, in his first 11 or 12 starts as the Avalanche's starting goalie, had not given up 3 goals in a game. The Oilers found a way to pop 4 past him after going down 2-0 against Minnesota. Philip Gustafsson's on a lot of people's Vezina ballots at the halfway point of this season. The Oilers managed to get 5 past him in that game. So they've been beating, even Jeremy Swayman's turned it around a little bit. Oilers popped 4 on him last week against Boston. So this Oilers offense is absolutely humming right now. And another thing that is kind of interesting is they've done the pairing up of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, which is usually a bit of a break glass in case of emergency type approach by the coaching staff. Like, it, to be fair, usually happens when they're down 2-0 in a hockey game. And it's like, all right, we need to come back, throw them out there. But what's been interesting about these last couple of comebacks is they're keeping McDavid and Draisaitl together with Hyman on the right side. And then they have Nuge centering Arvidsson and Podkolzin. And that line's actually been like a crazy driver for them. They handle the puck well. Vasily Podkolzin on his zone entries has been like so clean. If I had to give like my number one surprise for this Oilers team this year, it is either Ty Emberson or Vasily Podkolzin. The former Canuck, the numbers aren't there, but like, he never makes wrong decisions with the puck. He carries it in safely into the O zone. The production is starting to come along a little bit. Like, Oilers fans are loving this guy. He's been stapled in their top 6 basically since we had our last conversation.
And it's that consistency. We had Bag Milk on the show on Thursday, and him and I talked at length about Vasily Podkolzin. So people that are listening to this through the Canucks Convo feed are going to say, okay, we're talking about Podkolzin again. But it is. Like, out here, he was a fan favorite as well. The finishing's always been an issue for him, but it felt like with some regular deployment, which is what he's getting in Edmonton, that he might have been able to figure it out. And Tyler, like right before the season, I wrote over at Canucks Army, like, what is Vasily Podkolzin's updated ceiling? And I put it at a guy like Brandon Saad, who's a middle six winger. Like, he's never going to play on the top line, but like a solid middle six winger who can give you really solid production and be a responsible two-way guy. Like, Podkolzin could be that still. That's his ceiling in my mind. He's not going to be, a 90-point guy ever, but can he come in around 60 to 80 in that range? I think he can. I think the production could still be there for Podkolzin. And look, just as someone who covered him, I always had the most respect for Vasily Podkolzin. Absolutely loved the guy. He was a pleasure to deal with, and I wish him all the best.
Yeah, and so far in Edmonton, it's working. And from an Oilers perspective, the fact that he's under contract for one more year at $1 million is like such a bargain, especially since he's been fitting in beautifully inside of their top six. On that Canucks blue line, again, just outsider only reading the headlines with this team for the last little bit. I know there was some kind of noise about a guy like Eric Brandstrom going on waivers. I see our boy Vinny Desharnais is back into the top six. How's the blue line been shaking out? How's Vinny been looking over the last month?
So the easiest way to put this is Vinny's really looked good the last month because they've stopped trying to make him do things that he can't do. He's played a third pairing role and he's done it really well. He's played on the penalty kill and he's done that really well. The big problem was when Filip Hronek went down, traditionally you would see your third pairing guy just move up to the second pair. But they realized pretty quickly, okay, we can't do that with Vinny Desharnais. He's not going to be able to play top 4 minutes. So it forced them to take their seventh defenseman, Noah Juulsen, and put him into that spot. So it kind of complicated things on the blue line that Vinny couldn't move up, and ultimately like the signing is a bit of a failure for this management group, and ultimately not using that cap space more wisely and not constructing that blue line better than they actually did is part of the reason that this team's struggling the way that they are right now. But again, it's just part of it. You're not going anywhere without Pettersson. You're not going anywhere without Miller playing at their best, and ultimately that's the big story. So on the blue line, yeah, the blue line's been bad. It's not been good enough. They need to move the puck a lot better, but nobody forced them to sign Vinny. Nobody forced them to sign Derek Forbort. They got a bunch of they cornered the market on third pairing defensemen, and now they have Quinn Hughes, Filip Hronek, and a bunch of third pairing defensemen. And Carson Soucy, like that's another big thing, is Carson Soucy was really good last year. He was a very clear number 3 on this team, and basically he's just been a part of the problem this year. He's just been another third pairing guy that they have back there.
So we're into the second half of the season now, and I get or understand that it can start to get late early at this time of year. But with everything that's kind of gone wrong, we'll say in Vancouver, like 2 wins in their last 10 games, they still have 5 points in their last 10 games. They've scooped up 10 loser points. They're only 1 point back of Calgary. And honestly, I don't think the teams below them, St. Louis, Utah, Anaheim, any of those teams, I don't think are legitimate threats to really go on a run and push for a playoff spot. With how bad everything's gone this year, like the path to them getting to the playoffs is still right there in front of them. Like I was, again, in kind of prepping for this and starting to read into some stuff. I saw Nick Kypreos was like, oh, Brock Besser could get traded. Then there's the Miller stuff and all these other guys that could get traded. Like, I don't think it's going to get so bad that they have to start pulling the pin and selling off all these guys ahead of the deadline, right?
We'll see, man. Like before the season, Patrick Allvin said, yeah, if we don't have a contract with Brock done by the trade deadline, we're going to have to make a decision on him. Clearly alluding to the idea of that they're going to have to trade Brock if they're not going to be able to get a contract extension done. How much easier does that become if this team isn't top of the Pacific? Like, that's ultimately the thing, is nobody took that seriously when it was the idea of, okay, well, if they're in the hunt and Brock's a big part of the success, and Brock's had a fine year, like he's been fine, but just fine. He hasn't been great. He's been good. He's been fine, but like he hasn't done anything, especially with the way that the team's playing right now and where they are in the standings. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they traded Brock Besser before the deadline rather than walking him to free agency. I'll tell you one thing, Tyler. The way they're playing right now and the way this core's reacting to adversity right now, again and again and again, we've seen this before with other coaches in the past. I'm not investing in Brock Besser. I'm not signing Brock Besser to a long-term contract extension right now. I don't even think that would be received very well right now by the fan base if they came out and said, yeah, we just signed Brock Besser for 8 years at $8 million. I don't think people would be ecstatic about that. Like, ultimately, you're investing in this core that has repeatedly come up below expectations. They had the year last year where they all kind of showed up, but first sign of adversity this year where everything went well last year and things didn't go well this year, and they crumble. Like, this is a weak team. This is a weak core, and ultimately I would say everybody but Quinn Hughes is on the table in my mind. Like, you have to be open to listening on everybody but Quinn Hughes right now, and ultimately It's not sell it and rebuild. It's sell it and try and salvage these final 2 years of Quinn Hughes' contract, because if you don't figure it out, like, man, like, there's legitimate worry in this market right now. And again, I'm not reporting anything. I'm saying there's worry among the fan base that naturally, why wouldn't Quinn want to go play with his brothers if he hits free agency and the team still hasn't done anything? Like, you have to figure it out. And if you don't think this core is going to ultimately be able to figure it out, you need to act fast. You need to make decisions. You need to make tough decisions.
Yeah, man, it is crazy to sit and have this conversation and kind of hear how bad things really are in the market out there. All right, let's go to tonight's hockey game. Let's maybe go to a positive. First off, for our friends at Bet365, the Oilers are favorites in this game, -165 on the money line. They're +160 on the spread, minus a goal and a half, of course, and the over-under is set at a nice even 6. I'd be very tempted to take the over on that one based on how good the Oilers offense is humming and also their goaltending. But let's go with a positive kind of from either side. I talked about Vasily Podkolzin for the Oilers. Not that he's going to factor into the score sheet, but another guy who's been great has been Ty Amberson. You said, how would the market react to a Brock Besser extension? The market in Edmonton is clamoring for a Ty Amberson extension. This guy came over in the Cody Ceci deal. And again, for how young he is, still under 100 games of NHL experience, like, I think he's going to be a top 4 guy for the Oilers one day. So there's talk that they may be trying to get an extension done with him on the offensive side of things for the Oilers. If there's one guy to watch, Victor Arvidsson is playing his best hockey as an Oiler. He's got 7 points in his last 10. He's absolutely buzzing right now. So if there's someone you were looking at to maybe surprise on the offensive side, maybe someone like Victor Arvidsson for Vancouver, who've been the bright spots up front on the offensive attack.
Oh, can I say Quinn Hughes? Like, do you mean forwards, or do you mean just
No, I
people
guess
who
not.
help drive the offense? Because it's Quinn Hughes, and right now, Tyler, I'm not going to lie, like, Quinn Hughes is the bright spot of this team. Can I think of another one? No, I can't. Like, I'm not going to sit here.
Was the Kiefer Sherwood thing just like a flash in the pan, like cool story for a bit, now it's done?
Okay, so here's the thing. Kiefer Sherwood's been fine, and you're not going to sit here and criticize Kiefer Sherwood, but the thing, when we talk about things that went right for the Canucks at the start of the year, was this idea that, okay, well, Elias Pettersson and JT Miller weren't going necessarily to start off the season, but you were getting these contributions. Pius Suter was leading this team in goals at one point. You had Kiefer Sherwood doing everything. You had Connor Garland playing phenomenally, but now all of those guys that I just mentioned and everybody else in the bottom 6 has kind of, I don't want to say fallen off, but they've regressed to basically what you would actually expect from bottom of the lineup players. So those guys are playing worse than they were at the start of the year, gotten going, whereas the thinking was, okay, well, those guys are going right now. We know that Elias Pettersson and JT Miller are going to get going, and how foolish were we for thinking that that was going to happen for sure, because it hasn't happened yet, and now you're not getting the depth contributions, and now all you have is the Quinn Hughes show, and you've got Quinn Hughes doing absolutely everything for this team right now. So yes, right now, heading into the game against the Oilers, Quinn Hughes is the lone bright spot. Rick Tocchet's begging his team to actually play defense and to actually buy in and not make boneheaded decisions and bad reads on the puck. We will see if they actually do it. They did it not that long ago against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Can they do it again? It was 2 embarrassing losses against the Winnipeg Jets and the Los Angeles Kings. It's Hockey Night in Canada. It's the Oilers. It's one of those games that it's like, if you can't get up for this one, then there are serious, serious problems in that locker room.
Man, yeah, it's a weirdly big game in the middle of January, I suppose. From an Oilers perspective, all right, if I'm going to give Canucks fans any reason to maybe be optimistic, Edmonton has had just this brutal schedule through the month of January. So they're 7-1. They have somehow survived this thing. But these are, I'm just going to rattle you through the 8 games and what time zone they've been in. You went Mountain, Pacific, Eastern, Central, Mountain, and then back to Pacific. They basically haven't played in the same time zone back-to-back games more than once. They've been on this crazy trip where, like, even when they come back home, it's for one game, then they're right back on the road that same night. So maybe the Oilers are due for a little bit of a stinker. Like, they went down to a 3-0 to Colorado, went down 2-0 to Minnesota. We're down 2-0 to Chicago. We're down 3-0 to Pittsburgh. They did lose that game. They were down 1-0 to Seattle as well. Like, in almost all of these games, they have been trailing at one point or another. And granted, again, they've come and had these amazing comebacks, but it's dangerous to play from behind. If the Canucks can get out early and maybe have some energy, like you said, get up for this game and punch the Oilers in the mouth once or twice with a couple of quick strikes. Again, Edmonton probably can't just keep coming back in every single game. So I do think, and actually this probably does tie into the Canucks as well, I think the first 10 minutes might tell us everything we need in this game. If Vancouver comes out and they're pouring on the pressure and they look like the better team, I don't know if Edmonton has a third straight comeback effort in them. If Edmonton comes out and you'd maybe be able to speak to this. If it's 2-0 Oilers 10 minutes in, what is that crowd going to be like?
Oh, there was boos last night. I was actually kind of surprised we didn't see a jersey on the ice. There was a guy at the end of the game that kind of ran down the stairs. I don't know if he got stopped, but I thought he was going to do it. He was running down the stairs from his seat, and I think he elected not to do it, but jersey on the ice. We're definitely approaching that time. There was boos after the power play. Like Tyler, like I don't know if you watched the game, but 2 power plays where they didn't get a shot. They're trailing by 1 goal. 2 power plays where they didn't even get a shot on goal. That's so embarrassing. And the fans are knowledgeable. They're paying good money, far too good money. Like these tickets are brutally expensive for the product you're actually getting on the ice. They're absolutely gouging their fans. But anyways, jersey on the ice. There's boo birds coming out. It's not great vibes right now. And look, like this team showed up against the Toronto Maple Leafs. They deserve some credit for that. They showed up and they played really well. They need to show up in this game. They absolutely need to show up for their fans. Put something good on the ice for your fans to be excited about. It's a Saturday night. It's the Edmonton Oilers. Like the Oilers, like you said, if you can hold the Oilers back for 2 periods, they're bound to run out of gas, right? Like they're bound to run out of gas at this stage of the trip. What is it, 3 games in 4 nights for the Oilers? Like you have to try to take advantage of that. And like you said, Tyler, if the Canucks don't come out of the gate firing, big issues in that game for them.
All right, CanucksArmy.com for all your other game day needs. Oilersnation.com for the GDBs. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk. You can watch me, Oilers Nation, every day, Monday through Friday, noon Mountain Time. David Quadrelli, Canucks Conversation with our boy Harmon Dial. And that is, I'm doing the time zones in my head right now. That is 2 o'clock Pacific
there you
to 3
go.
o'clock Pacific.
Yeah,
Boom.
nailed it.
Nailed it. All right, Quads, enjoy the game tonight, and we'll chat again in a week.
Cheers, buddy.